So first, the 4 stages of advanced mental perspectives. These are 4 very advanced perspectives that we take from the mind, and they are extremely advanced, and it's not something we should catch ourselves judging in other people, but simply be using this as a tool for our own self-progression and helping to understand what the potentials are that are there and the potentials which we are in fact actualizing at this moment. So the first advanced mental perspective is the piecemeal scientific approach. This bears such qualities as empiricism, that is a sort of scientific perspective of trying to break down and isolate cause and effect components, trying to draw rational and logical conclusions. This has to do with the formulation of mathematics, the central body of mathematics as we know it. Then we have pragmatism. Pragmatism is also about this being essentially a piecemeal approach. And even though it is very advanced, the thing with a scientific approach is that when you do a scientific study and you come up with one conclusion, the conclusion is not foolproof. And the next study might contradict it. And in fact, this is such a big, consistent issue that we do things like meta studies, and we do things like statistical comparison, statistical analysis, to attempt to analyze that on another level. And those methods are actually coming from the next perspective. But first, a moment to talk about the ethical angle that the piecemeal scientific approach or the pragmatist or empiricist approach takes, because it can very well be described as utilitarian. And this is a developed philosophical perspective, which is a very advanced one. And it was advanced in writing by the especially well-known authors John Stuart Mills and Jeremy Bentham. So with Jeremy Bentham, his take on utilitarianism is something called pleasure utilitarianism, which is in effect meaning that you should make an equation out of the situation, and you should attempt to balance the pain and pleasure in a reasonable way between the participants in that situation. So for a moral situation, you're most likely talking about a group of human beings. So for this group of human beings, the utilitarian approach says that you need to basically balance the pain and pleasure. So, you can dig in and you can find that there are assumptions maybe made about what a human being is, or that in certain ways we're the same, or certain ways we experience things the same way, or we can come to relative judgments about the same thing. So, I can value this apple in the same way that you can. So there are a lot of assumptions about that, but essentially the utilitarian perspective is very scientific. It's something that's used in corporate accounting a lot. It's a very, very powerful perspective. And this is also the perspective that says, a business can't exist unless it's profitable, because pragmatically, it's not going to exist. It's not going to persevere. It's not going to continue to be successful. So that's the piecemeal scientific perspective: empiricism, pragmatism, utilitarianism. Next, we have the systematic interdisciplinary approach. And the systematic interdisciplinary approach is about getting this next level perspective where if the scientific approach is very piecemeal, The systematic approach is an attempt to really take into account how there are these varying perspectives and to bring them together in a reasonable way. The first feature of systematic interdisciplinary approach, which I'll mention, is first principles. If you've read or you've heard of Ray Dalio's book, he wrote a book called Principles. And basically he claims that this book and the principles that he describes are the foundation of his business and life success. And this is very much a systematic approach. The taking and the making of principles is something you do before you've seen the research. It's something that you attempt to generalize as a lesson across all domains or for all participants. And this is also the moral approach of Immanuel Kant, who he wrote something called the categorical imperative, which is almost like an advanced, more precise philosophical form of the golden rule, but the golden rule is not interpreted in a uniform way. But the categorical imperative is specifically coming from the systematic interdisciplinary approach, because essentially the categorical imperative is saying that insofar as I am capable of understanding the situation, I will make moral decisions as if my moral decision, were to become a universal principle for all people in that situation, or all actors in that situation. So you can probably dig in here and see that there are some limitations and assumptions about this perspective, but it is extremely powerful, and it's a very, very moral perspective. And one of the most powerful things is we can realize that there are other people who are coming from a really innately benevolent place. And we can assume that people are basically trying to do the right thing, or they're basically doing the best that they can. And we can also behave according to these principles without resentment, and we can behave in a way that is independent from anyone else's behavior, regardless of how arrogant, dishonest, ungrateful, jealous, whatever behaviors seem to be exhibited by others that might otherwise annoy us. These principles can cut that out. And in Ray Dalio's case, these principles can allow you to weather the ups and downs of the stock market, because you're not going on that moment to moment, what's going on now? How do I need to behave now? You're relying on a system that's based on these first principles. So I've also discussed the second part, which is the humanitarian. And the humanitarian aspect of the systematic approach is that you can assume that everyone is coming from, basically they're doing their best, a perspective where they're basically doing their best. And if they don't seem to be doing their best, it's because there's probably something wrong. Either they're really stressed out, or they're in a really bad situation, which it's hard to really imagine how or why someone would put themselves into a really bad situation, intentionally disempower themselves, and then commit evil towards others, which would cause resentment to come towards them. So just think about that if that's something that you've struggled with in the past. The last thing, empowerment. So empowerment is about looking out and seeing the potentials that are there and seeing how they're not being actualized. So in terms of these potentials, what we're really looking at is the rest of the family. So if you're talking about your mental perspectives, then most of us develop one aspect of our minds more strongly than the other aspects, or a couple of aspects of mind very strongly. You know, one person is a very strong mathematician and very poor artist. Another person is a very strong anthropologist, but not a strong psychologist. And so the interdisciplinary approach in a mental perspective is about empowering these unempowered perspectives. So if you view yourself as an anthropologist, now you're also viewing yourself as interdisciplinary everything. So you're now not only being an anthropologist, but you're seeing anthropology through the lens of psychology. You're seeing anthropology through the lens of art. You're seeing anthropology through the lens of mathematics. And you can be interdisciplinary in all of these areas, in all of these fields. And the interdisciplinary approach, again, is an extremely powerful and extremely advanced perspective. All four of these mental perspectives are extremely advanced. So most likely, if you're watching this video, you'll find that you do exhibit these perspectives to a certain degree, and you may also hopefully be getting some material to think about how you can get to the next level in these perspectives as well. The third advanced mental perspective is what I call the matrix of mind approach. So the matrix of mind is called the matrix intentionally. If you've seen the movie Matrix, this is really what this movie is embodying. The awareness of the protagonist, Neo, is this awareness that so much of what he and other people think is real is really a function of the mind, and the mind is in some ways relative, or the mind is in some ways conditioned and liable to miss reality. So the first characteristic of the matrix of mind approach is that it's auto-evolutionary. So Neo is not only standing there waiting for Morpheus to find him, Neo is actually seeking Morpheus from the beginning. And if you remember what Trinity says to him, whispers to him in the nightclub scene, what she says is, "I know you've been looking for him, but what you're really looking for is an answer. It's the question that drives us." And then Neo says, "What is the matrix?" See, he is actively seeking awakening. He's actively seeking his potential, and he's actively seeking the awakening of his potentials, the evolution of his perspective, and the next characteristic is profound autonomy. So what he's doing in this case is he is actually moving beyond the bounds of what society has even told him is worthwhile to do. So he's living in this massive city, New York City in 1999, I think. And he looks around, and most people, they seem somehow content with what's going on. But Neo, for some reason, he wants to get to the next level. He wants to evolve his perspective. And even if there's only one person in the entire world that can help him, he's going to find that one person. Even if there is only a secret, one secret that he needs to find to get to that next level, he's going to uncover that secret. And the profound autonomy, he gets interrogated by these agents in the interrogation room, right? So rewatch that scene about profound autonomy. Okay. The third characteristic filling one's cup and then giving. So from the matrix of mind approach, what you really have is Morpheus saying, okay, some of these people are so hopelessly inured that basically you won't be able to help them. You won't be able to help these people because, why? Because it's not theoretically possible to help them? No, that's not actually what he's saying. What he's saying is that basically it's too hard to help these people. It's too hard to get to them. It's too maybe dangerous in the case of this movie. So filling one's cup and then giving is about using that perspective and Neo using his advanced perspective and his advanced potentials and his awakened evolutionary potentials to really fill his own cup, to achieve the things that make him feel whole and that really fill his evolutionary cup, fill his needs cups. So, you could think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Those are some of the basic needs: housing, shelter, food, water, relationships that are family or friends or whatever types of relationships are meaningfully essential to you wherever you're at. Belongingness in the right way for you. And so first he's filling all of those perspectives, and then you can see later on in the movies, and it's not just a thing where, okay, he spends 10 years filling his cup and then he goes to help someone else, but he is not essentially going and trying to help other people until he actually knows what's going on. And this is not a point that you should be discouraged from going out and talking to other people or helping other people. The point is that you can't help other people. Like those people trapped in the matrix, you can't help them if you're going to get dragged under yourself. You can't help those people if you're going to get stuck in the same matrix. You can't help someone out of the quicksand if you're going to get dragged into that quicksand as well. So that's the matrix of mind approach. The fourth advanced mental perspective is called the Zen Mind approach. And the Zen Mind, you can think of it as, well, what would a Zen monk be like? What is it like to be a Zen monk, and how do you experience a Zen monk? The first characteristic is this perspective of feeling like your cup is always full. This cup is something that never runs out, because essentially you are not draining it. There is nothing left that drains your cup. So there is nothing that makes you feel so afraid of being without shelter. There's nothing that makes you feel afraid of being without food. And at this point, again, I want to note that if you have this perspective and you are able to develop this advanced mental perspective, that's wonderful. And it doesn't mean that you never, ever again feel any sort of deficiency. It may be possible that someday you actually do suffer from food shortage. It's extremely hard to imagine in the modern world. Hypothetically, you could in the future experience some sort of deficiency, and it would simply disallow you, in a sense, from taking this Zen mind perspective. But that being said, the more developed this perspective is, the more resilient you will be to any sort of perception of deficiency. So that's another thing that's very powerful about this perspective, is that the cup is always full. And what comes with that, the next characteristic, is spontaneous appreciation. And I'm not going to say too much about that because it's just such a miraculous thing. Spontaneous appreciation. It is this looking out into the world and your experience and seeing, maybe it's perfect. maybe it's just perfect, just the way that it is. And maybe not much needs to be done about it, really, in actuality. There are so many things, moment to moment, each moment, to be grateful for. So many ways of using our faculties and our imagination. So much art in every moment of every day. And so much beauty that exists within every one of us, within every instant, within every other, within the world that's all around us. Beauty even in ugliness. Even in the ugliest things, there's beauty. Even in pollution, there's beauty. Even in trash, there's beauty. Even in death, there is beauty. And the last characteristic of the Zen Mind approach is profound harmony. And when you are well versed in this perspective, you will find that you attain a profound harmony with other people, and it is simply not easy to disturb your relationships with other people, and there are no big problems that you suffer with other people because essentially you are completely accepting them, and you are also presenting yourself in a harmonious way so that in your complete understanding of them, you're able to present yourself in a way that they don't experience extreme resistance to, or they don't experience painful reaction to. So in that sense, profound harmony is about kindness. And I think that kindness is one of the most, I think kindness is the most important quality in this world, because kindness, secretly, it makes life bearable for all of us. So these are the 4 advanced mental perspectives, or the 4 stages of advanced mental perspectives. And for a recap, we have first, the piecemeal scientific approach. This advanced perspective entails empiricism, pragmatism, and utilitarianism. Then we have the systematic interdisciplinary approach. And this perspective entails first principles, humanitarianism, and empowerment of disempowered perspectives. And by the way, this also applies to disempowered perspectives of others. So other people, if it's true that if women have been disempowered, now is the time to empower them. If certain ethnicities have been disempowered, or certain types of people or certain personality types have been disempowered, now is the time to empower them. The matrix of mind approach, which is autoevolutionary, which is about filling the cup and then giving, which is about profound autonomy. And then finally, the Zen Mind approach, which is having the cup always be full, which is an experience of profound harmony, and which is about spontaneous appreciation of what is happening in this moment, without the need for qualification or management. So these are the 4 stages of advanced mental perspectives. And in the next video, I'll be discussing the alchemical processes. Enjoy your moments.